fee waiver, will definitely, if that'll help you, definitely apply for it and apply for it early. Okay, Fritz?
Hello. So I'm going to be talking about the before you apply and getting ahead. Sorry, for me the PowerPoint hasn't moved. It's still on the fee waiver.
Oh,
Is
I got
is
you.
it the same?
There you go.
Okay, thank you. All right. So first things first, before you even apply, just make sure that you have everything in order. So just like all of your experiences, your volunteering, your shadowing and work experience, just have that maybe like on a Google Doc, or even better yet, make an account with CASPA. I know that it's open right now. I think it closes like March for the next upcoming cycle and reopens in April. But if you want to just get a head start just to see what the CASPA application looks like and just start putting your stuff in there, it'd be great and it'll put you ahead because when it reopens and at the end of April, you already have most of your stuff in there. Maybe make a few more changes, like say that you work like, 100, 200 more hours between February and March. You can add that on there. But yeah, another thing that you should also consider is to make a list of your dream schools. So for me, I'm from California, so I made a list of like 14 schools from California, and I made sure to look at the prerequisite requirements. It's very important that you do because if you apply to that program and you don't meet the prerequisite requirements, you're going to automatically get rejected. And it's like you're throwing away $61, right? So yeah, don't do that. I definitely did that, I'll admit. But it was just one of those things where I didn't look closely enough about the prerequisite requirements. And then also just make sure you have everything in order. Get your recommendation letters in order. I had my recommender do it before it closed in at the end of March, just so that they could be familiar with CASPA, because I know for some people it's like, oh, where do I upload the letter and all that fun stuff. If they've done it once, they can do it again when it reopens in April, just so it's easier. Because you can't submit unless you have everything all together, and sometimes that's like the part that delays your application the most, just getting someone to upload the letter. And if they've already written it, then it's just a simple re-upload of the letter that they gave for you for the previous cycle that you didn't submit. Next slide.
Oh,
It's still.
oh, no, no, I got you. I got you. One thing I also did just want to highlight on this slide is that it has been really difficult to obtain like in-person shadowing hours for some pre-PA students. And so programs, they've started placing less emphasis on the number of shadowing hours that you need. And they've also started to accept virtual hours. So look into the program that you're applying for that, just to see like what their requirements are and what they'll allow, because they've been more lenient on that. But yeah, I got
Right.
you. All right.
Thanks.
Yeah, you're
Yeah, I
welcome.
was really creative with mine. My first couple of shadowing hours, I actually was a patient of a PA, and I just asked them if I could straight up shadow them, and they said yes. So those are my first 8 hours that I got. Okay, so next slide. So the before you apply now in between April, it'd be great for you to start working on that personal statement and definitely get some other people to look at it because for me, like I just did it and I did like my first draft, but when other people read it, they pointed out some things that I never considered. So definitely have more eyes. The more eyes, the better. And also definitely, we just talked about getting your shadowing and patient care hours. So just get that in order and then see if also just get a really good job description of what you do, because when you put in your experience hours, it's going to ask you like, oh, what did you do in this position? I use bullet points because there's like a character limit for each thing. So I just wanted to save as much characters as I could so I can talk more about what I actually did in my position. And definitely, I mentioned this already, just get the evaluators to get that letter of recommendation done. You don't want that to be your rate determining step where you're just waiting for them to submit and everything else is already, I hate having to depend on other people. So that's why I like to get ahead of that. And also at the same time, get your resume and CV done. Because then when you are, again, putting down your experiences, you can just copy and paste from your CV into CASPA. And also request those unofficial transcripts. Sometimes it takes forever for them to do it. I think most of it, it's like online now, but I know for one of my schools, I had to go in person and request it because they weren't on like, I forgot what the website was for getting transcripts, but yeah. And yeah, also just like if you have any issues with writing a personal statement, sometimes if you're like an undergrad student, sometimes they have like a writing department or like a career center. They can like at least help you work on your why becoming a PA. Because sometimes it's the hardest part. Like I know everybody in here wants to be a PA, but it's hard to say why, and it's very personal to each one of us. So yeah. All right, next slide. And so CASPA opens April 24th, 2025 for the class of 2027. So definitely work to complete those applications. Also, when you're reviewing each program and you're also looking at prerequisites, also consider if they have to, if they offer the GRE like as a requirement. Because like for me, it also changes every year. So for example, when I applied to EVMS my first year, they didn't make the GRE as a requirement, but they made the CASPER as a requirement. But now, like this year, if you were to apply, it's not no longer a requirement. So like each program has like their own dependent requirements. So just make sure to double check and see if they changed anything, because what was true last year might not be true for this year. And also submit as early as you can because a lot of these programs, they're like rolling deadlines. So the earlier you get it, the earlier they see your application, the earlier they'll consider you. But you also have to address your pros and cons because, for example, for me, my weakness is that I didn't have a lot of patient care hours. So if I submit early, CASPA locks in whatever that you had put in already, and that's it. You can't really update your hours manually every time. So if you apply later, you might be able to include more hours because, like, I know that each program might have like a minimum of 1,000 or two. It's program dependent, but you got to like weigh the pros and cons. If you have enough hours, then it might be wise for you to apply early. But if not, you might want to wait a little bit later. But don't wait too late that you're like literally the last person to apply. Um, okay. And next slide. So in May, it'd be great to reach out to admission counselors at each program. I definitely did that for EVMS, and that's where I learned that one thing that they looked at a lot was volunteer hours or service hours. Like each program has their own different thing that they look at, but this is one thing that they focused on. And luckily for me, I have about 5,000 hours of volunteer service, so it was really beneficial for me to make that point. And make sure to submit by the end of this month if you can. And also start looking at the supplemental applications for each program because some programs might ask you additional questions that you have to answer. And next slide. So in June, again, complete any outstanding supplemental applications if you haven't already. Sometimes a lot of these supplemental questions are very similar for each school. So like it don't like if you're gonna copy and paste and they're asking you specific things, like it would be really bad if you like copy and paste the supplemental question answer for one school and then paste it to another, you know? Like if they're asking you like about your like why PA or for example, and then why do you want to choose this program? Like it'd be really bad if you did. So don't do that. Just always double check and make sure. And then yeah, start preparing for interviews in July or August. I did a mock interview with my career center for my undergrad and also a couple of PAs that I knew. So it might be helpful for you to do that, especially if interviewing is not your strong suit. Next slide. And September to December, start interviewing at PA schools and make sure logistically also to consider if you have to travel for these interviews. So, like, for example, me being from California, I had to figure out how to fly all the way to Norfolk because there was a direct flight. And, like, for me, I had to consider one whole travel day just to travel and make sure that I get to my interview on time. So, I traveled all of Thursday for my interview on Friday morning because you don't want to risk it with any red eye flights, for example, and then your flight gets delayed or it's snowing in Norfolk, and now you're like going to miss the biggest interview of your life, right? So yeah, don't do that. Just make sure that you think about it logistically and also financially, because I know that each school that you apply to, it'll increase your cost, but you also have to consider if you get an interview and it's not a Zoom interview, and you have to fly there. That's another thing you have to think of with like hotels and flights and that. So definitely consider that. And next slide. So some Virginia PA programs start in January. EVMS is one of them, and their deadline was in March, so it was one of the later deadlines. So it really worked in my favor because since their deadline was so much later, I could apply later and have more patient care hours that would make me more competitive. But other programs like Mary Baldwin University and Randolph-Macon, they have earlier app deadlines, even though their programs start in January. So it's just like something to consider. I mean, all it takes is one program to get into, and one yes, and you're a PA student. But I think also South University also starts in January. I think they're in Richmond. But yeah, so most PA programs do start between May and August, and that's something to consider because when you get in, it's like you have to let your folks and your friends know, like, I'm starting PA school at this time. So like for me, I spent as much time as I could with my friends and family because I knew that once January started, I'm all in PA school. So like, yeah, there will be times where you'll miss like, weddings and like the birth of your cousin or something. But like, yeah, PA school is that important. Sometimes it's hard to reconcile both going to PA school and making time for all these other important things. That's it for me.
Perfect. Thank you. I appreciate that. Going on again, my name's Colby. I like to go by Cole. For anyone who has questions after for me, I'll answer to either of them. But I'll kind of go through kind of what the application process is going to look like. Um, First and foremost, this dashboard right here, spend some time on it. Don't feel bad if you look at it for too long, because I don't think there is a too long that you can look at this, because this is where you're really going to want to spend most of your time learning, because this is where you're going to get everything through your application figured out. This is exactly what it looks like, where you can have the different subsections where you're going to dive into each part of your application, as well as be able to see updates and different notifications on like kind of things that are going to happen. So you can kind of see up in the right hand corner. Um, that's where you're going to see the updates at, and then you can able to see like there's the different headings of like the different areas that you need to fill out and keep up to date with your applications, and like the fees that you're accruing from it, and make sure that you're on top of all of them. When you get into like, I think it's listed as a red one on the submit application page for it, and you can keep in track with all the fees that you're going to be hitting. And then after you get your process started with it, you can kind of check the status of it up there also in the top right. So I just cannot stress this enough, that get comfortable on this page, because you will spend a lot of time sitting on this page as you go through the application process. And if you can kind of get through this part and feel more comfortable at it, it'll make the whole application phase go a lot smoother. Mm-hmm. So going into the next portion, with kind of the personal information aspect of it, is exactly what it is. This is where you're going to put in a lot of your background and the demographics and kind of what makes you you and what's going to make you stand out. And like Fritz was talking about, like everyone's different experiences, a lot of it's going to go in here. It's important to make sure you put different things. So obviously I started out talking by saying my name's Colby, but I go by Cole. A lot of my information is under Colby because that's my legal name, but I've gone by Cole since I was 2 years old. So a lot of other information is under Cole. So to make sure if you have alternate names that you go under, or like if you got married and most of your stuff from undergrad is on your maiden name, or if you change your name at any point, make sure that you kind of put that and make sure that everything's there. As well as use kind of accurate stuff so that they can get back to you if there is an issue going on. A lot of people have their own emails that's like your personal email. And then when you get into a university, you'll get a university email. Make sure you put the email in here that you're going to be checking the most and that you're going to have access to the most, because that's going to be, I mean, that's just going to make it easier to kind of not get lost in all the updates that you're going to be getting as you apply through school. Go ahead to the next one. Further on to kind of the personal information, this is where you're going to put a lot of stuff kind of to explain, well, a couple things. You're going to have a couple essays you're going to want to put into it. This one is specifically highlighting kind of the academic infraction section, where like if you have any oh my goodness, I'm sorry, any disciplinary action or academic probations you've been on, this is your chance to kind of explain why it is and kind of what happened. And then over the next two slides, I'll go over kind of the COVID one. If you want to move forward, perfect. So this is an optional essay this year. I don't think, Christi, correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't think my CASPA had anything regarding this, but in my personal statement, they said, has this affected you at all? But we didn't have our own section when we were able to fill it out, which was kind of interesting. But this is kind of an optional essay that you can do. It may or may not be on the upcoming one, but this is kind of explaining how it I guess, shaped your process and how you've gone through undergrad. I don't know if any of you were coming out of high school at the time COVID hit, and if how that changed things up or messed up your availability in getting hours or your labs done. I know I had a lot of issues with my labs for my undergrad because a lot of them were online now. I didn't spend a lot of time in the lab during COVID. So this is another section where you can kind of touch on that and go to the next one, Dom. Thank you. And then here's the life experience one. This one was optional in 2025, 2026. This is a really good opportunity to say things that are happening like kind of outside of what's happening in medicine and what you've done in medicine to kind of make you stand out a little bit more. This is a good opportunity to explain kind of things you've done. So for me in this section, I was a 3-sport athlete in college and a 4-sport in high school. I put how this was able to help shape that. I put how I was working a job and doing all these things through high school and through undergrad to where I could get my work ethic and have a chance to kind of explain that, because a lot of things that we do to get into school is medicine based, but a lot of it is kind of what shaped us to be the person we are now, to where we would be a good fit in the program. Because whether or not you're in medicine or not, you're still a person, and that this is a very good section for you to kind of pro like present that to this program that you're interested in. Um, a lot of the time, programs will look at people who fit in the program, not necessarily just good students. So that's another good thing to kind of keep in mind is this is your chance to do it. This is your chance to show you who you are and kind of get that out there. Dom, thank you. And then also going into this is where you can put all your academic history in. You'll be able to go through and put the stuff from your high schools, your undergrads, and get those transcripts fed in. I know a minute ago we talked about the GRE scores. For my program, we needed to submit a GRE score, but I don't know how much of a impact that had from my score for me getting in, but I know this is where I could go put it in at. The cool thing that I like about this is if you are type A, like a lot of PA students are, you have to kind of watch everything go in and you can do that yourself, or you can spend $69 to send your transcripts in and they'll input it in there and you can review it. But you have to make sure that you're putting them in directly from the unofficial one or from your official transcript. Not kind of saying, oh, well, I think I got an A in this class, so I'll just put that. Like, you want to be most accurate to it, because then it's just going to set you up for success in the long run. And then also, this is also kind of cool that, like we were talking a minute ago with the prerequisites, make sure that you are hitting those prerequisites. And if you're not for a school you want, find a way to be able to take that. Or if you got a bad grade in one that maybe isn't required by the university, but it brings your overall GPA down, you can choose to omit those that would kind of delay your process in going into this.
All right. And so then, hi, my name is Christi. And so then I'll be talking about the supporting information section. And so this section is quite a bit, but this section is a lot more open for you to be able to express yourself and explain exactly who you are and why you're interested in medicine. So this section includes a section for evaluations, which is essentially letters of recommendation. You also have sections for you to write in your different experiences that you've had and what has brought you to this point of being ready to apply to PA school. There's also the list for the achievements. You can put in any licensing you've had, like for example, if you're an EMT. And this is also the part where you're writing in your personal statement and any professional memberships that you may have. And so first off, the first section under supporting information is what's called the evaluation section. And essentially an evaluation is the same thing as a letter of recommendation. And so it's important to know that for CASPA itself, you're required to submit anywhere between 2 to 5. And so 2 is the minimum that you can apply with. But a lot of schools, when you look on their websites, they do apply usually 3 letters of recommendation. And so I highly would encourage you, once you've made your list of schools you want to apply to, make sure you check and see if they describe anything about what they're looking for letters of recommendation. Since a lot of schools require 3, some will specify that one of those letters must come from a PA, or some might say we want 1 to come from a professor, 1 to come from a supervisor, and 1 to come from a PA or a doctor or a nurse practitioner. Other schools, they don't have any recommendations or don't seem to care at all. So just make sure you're looking and making sure that for the schools you're applying for, you're hitting the requirements with this. And so I also would recommend that you ask your evaluators in advance to write you a letter of recommendation. So about like 4 to 6 months before you think you'd be ready to apply, I suggest asking them and going in person to that person you're going to ask, and then just ask if they'd be willing to write you a letter. And I'd encourage them to try to write it as early as they can, because if your person who's writing your letter doesn't end up ever writing you the letter, you can't apply without a minimum of the 2 letters. So you don't want that to delay your process. And so then what you do in order to get the process rolling is you go into CASPA, you click on evaluations, and as you can see in this box for evaluation 1, for example, you click on the create an evaluation request, and you typically have to put in the name of your evaluator and their email. And then from there, CASPA takes charge, and they send your evaluator an email requesting them to upload the letter. And the only other thing in this section that is important to note is that for every evaluation, it gives you the option of whether you would like to see your letter or waive the right to see your letter, which means you don't see what's being written in it. And in general, schools like to see you click that button like, yes, I'm going to waive the right to see the evaluation, because then they know that the evaluator feels free to be able to write their true and honest feedback about you. And so then schools feel better knowing that the evaluator wasn't afraid to write their honest feedback about you because they knew that they would see your letter. And so then also for the next big section in supporting information is your experiences and achievement section. And so you can see this is a little bit of a screenshot of exactly what it looks like on the CASPA. And you can put in all sorts of types of experiences. For example, if you've done anything in leadership, any extracurriculars, shadowing. But the biggest thing that schools are looking for are the patient care and the healthcare experience. And I know a lot of people get really confused, like what is the difference between those two? But patient care experience is typically defined as something that's very hands-on. Like, for example, I gained my patient care experience hours as an EMT and as a nursing assistant. And then healthcare experience would be something that's more administrative in healthcare. So, for example, if you are a nursing assistant, but you spend usually half of your shift is spent filling out paperwork, then that would be more like a healthcare experience because you're not actually with a patient and you're more doing charting. And then the hours that you spend that are actually like with a patient would be your patient care hours. And so also for all of these experiences that you fill in general, it's a really good idea just in your undergrad or in your couple years before applying, that you try to keep track of all your experiences that you do that you'd want to put in your application. For example, you should be keeping track of your supervisor's contact information and around when you started and ended this experience and around your approximate total hours. And so something interesting CASPA does is they don't ask you how many hours did they do this. What they ask you is they ask, how many hours did you do this per week? And for how many weeks did you do this activity? So you need to put in like your average hours per week and how many weeks total you did this activity. So it's good to kind of keep track of that. And you also get around 600 characters to describe all those experiences. And the achievement section is very similar to this, and that's more, it's under a different tab, but for achievements, you just put in anything, like if you wrote any publications or if you got any scholarships, if you were on the dean's list, that's what you'd put under achievements. And then also under supporting information is your personal statement. And so they just ask you, why do you want to become a PA? And you have 5,000 characters, which typically ends up being around 1 page single spaced. And this is so just an important part of this whole application because you get to explain several different experiences that you've had that are part of your journey, kind of link them all together and show why you'd make a great PA. And my biggest piece of advice I'd give you for this is don't just write your essay as to like why you want to do medicine, because this essay is all about like, why do you want to become a physician assistant? So I know kind of for my essay, I opened it as more starting like a story that I had that I felt was like important to me that I had in an experience in medicine. And I kind of described that story and explained why I was like interested in medicine in the first place. But that was all more in my like first paragraph or two. And then after that, I started explaining like, now that I've established I'm interested in medicine, now I'm going to explain why I want to be a PA. So then I talked about different experiences I'd had with shadowing a PA who was very important in shaping my journey to be a PA. And then just like continuing further on and like explaining more down that route. And so then also in this section is the licensing and certification and memberships. And so this is also the section where you just want to keep track of any past and current licenses you've had. Like if you've been CPR certified, that counts as something that you can put down. Or if like me, you had your EMT certification, you put that down. And then also in this section is your membership section, is a different tab. And so if you are a part of any professional organizations, like for example, if you joined as a pre-PA student member for VAPA, which is our local state PA organization, or if you're a student member of VAMPA, or if you're part of a student membership of the national PA organization, APA, that would be a great place to put it. I know at least for me, I didn't know about any of these things. So I had left my membership section blank. And so it's also totally fine. But if you are interested in becoming a student member in any of those organizations, you do get to put them on your application. And so moving on from supporting information, the next like big tab on your dashboard is your program materials. And so then this whole section is all individualized based off of the schools that you're applying to. So basically you'll be able to click into each one of your schools, and then you'll be able to fill out certain information that the schools require. So some schools, for example, will already in your CASPA off the bat, before you can even apply to them, you have to fill out different essays or attach different things in this. Like, for example, I know I applied to Shenandoah University, and they had in my application cycle an essay that I was required to upload about their core values of Shenandoah University and how I met them. And then some other schools might literally have almost nothing in the program's requirement. But typically each program in this section will have a list of all of their required classes, and you'll have to go in and like select and show them like, I've taken this prerequisite class and so forth. So again, it's just good to be able to look at the program materials, make sure you're hitting all the requirements, and make sure that you're filling out any extra essays these schools might have. And so then lastly, something to talk about is the CASPA test. And so CASPA test, some schools require it and some schools don't. So if you do have a school that requires it, I'd make sure to be reading all of your school's websites really carefully to look and see, because this is completely separate from the CASPA, and you won't see the CASPA test listed anywhere on your CASPA. So this is only something you'll know is required from a school if you look at their website. And so CASPA is an open response situational judgment test. And essentially it's supposed to measure parts of your social intelligence and professionalism. And you take this test completely online through Acuity Insights. And so when I had to take it, I just used a computer. I sat at my desk at home. And so essentially it takes about 65 to 85 minutes, and there's a video section where they will show you a video, and then they'll ask you like a prompt, and then immediately that they start recording you, and then you have to respond to them through video on what you would do in this situation. And then after you get through the video section, there's also typed responses where they give you like 5 minutes or 3.5 minutes to respond to several different questions, and you have to type it out. And so currently in Virginia, from what we can tell, Emory and Henry require this, as well as Mary Baldwin, University of Lynchburg, and Randolph-Macon. So quite a few schools in Virginia do require it. But you can go to Acuity Insights to look up for more information about CASPA and also your school's websites.
Perfect. Now you've gotten to the point where you can submit your application. You've hit all the boxes, you've checked all the things off. It's an exciting experience. It is fun to get to this point, but you need to make sure that you hit all the boxes. You need to make sure that you hit all of these things. And then what's recommended is as you finish it, update it, send it, and submit it. But take that with a grain of salt, because these are non-refundable. So once you do it, you're submitted. You're locked in for that university that you sent it to. Again, make sure that you get all the things in there that you want. Double, triple check it. Have someone else go through behind you and make sure that you hit all these things. Because once you're on it, once that fee's paid, once you hit that button, there's no going back. You've hit it. And congratulations with that. That is such a fun experience to be able to do that. I remember when I did it, I called my parents right away, and I was so excited that I was able to kind of submit these applications to get the ball rolling. But again, just cannot stress enough, make sure that you hit all the boxes for each university. And a good way to keep up with it is just submit it once you're done. Once you finish one, hit it, start the next one, or see which ones you can carry over to the next one to expedite the process. congratulations, you're getting through it.
Awesome. And then after you submit, just a few things that we also wanted to mention is that making sure that you're checking your email frequently. So I know a little bit ago, Fritz had talked about making sure that you're using the right email or the most common email where you're going to be checking frequently. So check your email frequently for updates from CASPA. They'll let you know when your application is received, when it's processed, when it's completed. And I'll go through what those different statuses are pretty shortly in the next slide. But application verification, which is why it's important to apply early, it can take up to 10 business days and sometimes even longer, depending upon the like frequency or the heightened like amplitude of applications that are coming in at one time. So like typically in April, like end of April, you have a lot of students that are, submitting their applications because they want to get them in early. And so verification time may take a little bit longer than 10 days. Or, if you're, applying a little bit later, so like say, in August or September, then your application verification may not take 10 business days. So it just depends on when you apply. So again, applying early limits the delays in that, being able to get that done. And then another thing too is I know we've all stressed this, but definitely look to see if any of your schools have any additional requirements to apply. And by doing this, that will prevent any delays in your application. And so, going to those schools' websites that you're interested in, looking up what their full like application process is, what their requirements are, what additional things they want you to do. So that way you're prepared ahead of time, after you submit, and you can just work on just waiting and work on, preparing for interviews, which is something that we'll head into soon. One thing that I wanted to mention too, if you are applying to Virginia state schools, James Madison University and Emory and Henry College, they have a supplemental application with an additional application fee on their website that you must, with an additional application that you must complete on their website before you apply to the program. And so making sure that you're looking that up too, if those are schools that you want to apply to. And then University of Lynchburg, if you apply to that program, they send you a secondary application after they have reviewed your CASPA application. And so they have all this listed on each of the program's websites, just making sure that you're looking at that. Okay, so the statuses, which are important. So we tried to kind of color code it to make it easier, but so there's 3 different statuses that like you'll go through once you submit your application. So the first status is received. So that means that CASPA has received your application and they're waiting for your transcripts to arrive. Okay. And again, once it's received, again, I said the application verification process can take up to 10 business days or a little bit longer. And so that just means received. Nobody's looked at it yet. Complete means that your transcripts have been received by CASPA and it's in the queue to be verified. So once your transcripts come in from your school, your application again is considered complete. But if they are not in, your application is still going to be on that received queue until they receive your official transcripts to mark it as complete. The last status is verified. So that's green. That's like what you want. That means that your transcripts have been verified by CASPA and that your application together with your transcripts are now available for programs to view. And so programs, it's important to know that programs may choose to process and review your applications at this time. Sometimes, if certain programs, they have an influx of applications coming in, sometimes it may be a delay in them reviewing your application, but typically once your application's verified, within a couple weeks, you'll hear back from your program on the status of your application and whether or not you receive a supplemental move forward with that. And again, as Cole mentioned, you can review your status of the CASPA application on the applicant dashboard. So just by going there, they'll be able to update you on like when you've reached certain statuses. Okay. So as we're moving into the QA session, there's a few things that we wanted to highlight to you all. I know that you all probably see all these and you're like, how am I going to access these? These are links. We plan on sending you, everyone that's attended, a PDF copy of this presentation. So you'll be able to access all of these links and everything that we've discussed this evening. But all of these are just very important resources that will be helpful to you on your application journey. The first one is just the CASPA program directory. It's a direct link that just provides a list to all the PA programs in the country, not just the state of Virginia. The next link just talks about the CASPA fee waiver, so that way you can directly access that on the CASPA website. The third one, which is important, this was something that I went to a lot when I had questions, the Applicant Help Center. They have a phone number that you can call. They have customer service representatives that are there to answer your questions about the application. And then they also have ways in which you can get your frequently asked questions answered just by clicking on the website, because I'm sure if you've had that question, other students in the past have had it. And so they have sections to be able to address your questions there if you just have a quick question, or you can call them, or you can email CASPA. Another thing too is that fourth bullet point, that just gives you a list of all the program deadlines so you can easily access them. So that's something that I would recommend that you bookmark. So if there are certain programs that you're applying to, instead of clicking on their website every day, you can just like click on that link and it'll give you a list of all of them. And the last thing, which again, we'll get into soon, but just a little blog about some interview preparation strategies that will just be useful to you as you prepare for that as well. And again, you all will have access to these links. Okay, so I know that I briefly introduced everyone at the beginning, but just to give a little bit more detail, these are our names. So the first year students that spoke with you this evening, you have Colby or Cole, first year student at University of Lynchburg PA program, Christi Fertich, which is, she's also a first year student at University of Lynchburg PA program. You have me, I'm a second year student at University of Lynchburg. Fritz, he's a second year student at EVMS. And then Danika, she is a recent PA graduate at Shenandoah. And so we're all going to be your panelists in this next section as we move into the next portion of the workshop. And so this is a time for you all who have joined to ask us anything and everything about the CASPA application process. Again, right after this, we'll have time for you all to ask questions and talk about interview prep, but we just want to make sure that we get everything addressed for the CASPA application since it will be opening soon. And so we'll open the floor to everyone here. If you don't feel comfortable, turning off and unmuting your mic to ask a question, feel free to post your question in the chat. And we'll be able to access that and respond as well. But definitely, this is what we're here for. So please feel free to ask away.
Somebody asked a question in the chat
Yes.
about if EMT hours are better than farm tech hours and which certificate they should obtain.
I can take that. I think it does depend on your school, but correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe some programs, like not all take farm tech, if I'm correct. And so I know that some will, but I know that other ones don't consider farm tech as being like patient care hours because you're still with patients who are coming up and asking for meds, but compared to an EMT, for example, you're not necessarily providing care like taking vitals or by helping to administer meds, for example, if you were a nurse. So in general, it's definitely some schools will totally take farm hours, but in general, I would say EMT probably would be better if you want to make sure that every single one of your schools will take hours, because for an EMT, pretty much every single PA school will take EMT hours, no question.
Yeah, I think another job that's like that is like scribing. I think a lot of programs don't take scribing, or for example, medical assistant positions. Some might be considered more of a healthcare experience if you're definitely more in the back or more administrative versus if you're like upfront with the patient. So definitely ask and reach out to specific programs to see if they'll consider those hours as patient care hours, because that's what's really most important.
And really, before you even reach out, all of these programs have websites. It would be not a good first impression if you reach out and ask a question that can be easily Googled and like checked on their website. So just look into that. They have a list of things that they consider to be patient care hours versus healthcare hours. And so schools may vary slightly, but if you're thinking about a general rule of thumb, if you did not physically touch the patient, then it's probably more likely to be healthcare experience versus if you actually interact with the patient, took their vitals, maybe had something where you actually physically were caring for the patient, that's patient care.
Perfect. Thank you for that question. And there was another question too that was I addressed, but I just wanted to make sure everyone was able to see it. There will be a link to a recording after the Zoom ins where you'll be able to have access to everything that we discussed. And we'll also send you a PDF copy of the PowerPoint slides with everything on it. So you all will have access to all of that as you prepare to apply.
There was a follow-up question about the EMT portion, and I can address it because I was an EMT. I don't know if anybody else was an EMT before PA school. Oh, great, Fritz too. Yeah, so the person's question was that they're worried about horror stories as it relates to being an EMT. Obviously, as an emergency medical technician, you do respond to medical emergencies. Now, that's a very broadly used term because when they call, if you call 911, we have to show up regardless of like of the acuity, right, of the call. So you kind of know before you get to where you're going what the reason that like you're responding to that place is. Now that does open up opportunities for things to be potentially traumatic. I can personally say that I don't recall anything that was intentionally horrific in my experience, but I think a lot of that is probably dependent on where you're actually like running, like where the station that you're part of, the demographics. I was in a suburb in Virginia and we were like we're not really doing anything that was too crazy. Some low blood sugar, occasional drug reactions, like sometimes it was, false alarm type of thing. So I also should mention that I finished all my licensure and then the pandemic hit. And so they had scaled back to being essential personnel only. And I was a volunteer EMS person. And so career or paid EMS was pretty much the only people running at that point in time. So I can't speak to what they saw, but maybe Fritz has something. And I saw that Dr. Sabre was also going to answer.
So I actually got my EMT certification right before the pandemic started. So it was like March 1st, I think. And I think the world closed like on March 15th. So initially it was actually hard to get a job because everything was like hiring freeze. But I was hired eventually in July of 2020, and I was on the ambulance. And the majority of my phone calls were patients who had COVID, who waited too long to go to the hospital. And so I've had a lot of like calls that were actually really bad. Like a lot of people didn't know that they were sitting at 76% on O2. So it was bad, but I think that also prepared me, and also it made me realize that this was something that I had wanted to do. Because before I was an EMT, I was actually an accountant for about 5 years. So totally different field, totally different focus. But the adrenaline rush and being able to make medical decisions on my feet and knowing which hospitals to go to right then and there to treat for my patient, like those are like important skills that like being an EMT will prepare you for. So like when you are actually like doing your stuff in PA school, or if you're doing stuff on clinical rotation, especially if you're going to do an ED rotation, like if you dealt with bad calls before, you will know exactly how you're going to act when a code happens. Like it's like intangible things, like being at the right place at the right time with whatever you need to be, like whatever you need for that patient at that moment. Like those are important things that you can't really, I guess, experience unless you've done it before. I mean, maybe if you're lucky, you can, but for the most part, I just prepared myself, and because of that, I know how to act when those certain things can happen. Versus a lot of my colleagues who are like medical assistants, or they've never actually done a lot of this other stuff. So I can say that my EMT skills have been really important to me, and why I guess I'm good at what I do and where I'm at today. And they also shaped into what kind of PA I want to be in the future.
was a question about GPA. What GPA would you recommend having in order to apply to PA school? Under 3.5, but not under 3. Would you recommend a post-bac, master's, or just applying?
I can answer this. So for each school, the minimum is typically a 3.0. They want you to have at least a 3.0, like minimum GPA to apply. Some may have higher, but for the most part, a majority of PA programs have a 3.0 minimum. And so there was a pre-PA student, now turned PA student, that I kind of helped and worked with, whose GPA was like a 2.9, and it didn't quite hit like the 3.0 threshold. And so what she ended up doing, is she did some courses at a community college to bring up her GPA to like what it needed to be, to where like she could, retake a couple of courses at the community college level, which she was able to submit a transcript for. And when CASPA calculated her like GPA all in all, she was able to bring up her GPA to that 3.0 minimum. And so I'd say as long as you have a minimum of 3.0, you're fine. But to be more competitive to schools, it would be better to have higher than that. However, that's why, we made that recommendation with like having, target schools, like schools that are like your dream schools, schools that are like your safe schools, and then schools that are kind of like right in between. So that way, you're kind of expanding your horizon and broadening that, to be able to have like a better chance. But yeah, if you're under a 3.5 and not under a 3.0, you're fine. Again, you can do a master's degree, you can do a post-bac, or you could just apply. I think it just depends on the program and their requirements. Another thing too that we did not mention that I did want to bring up is that most schools, at least University of Lynchburg, they offer they want you to take the GRE, but they waive that if you have a master's degree. So sometimes like if you're applying to a program and you're like, my undergrad GPA wasn't that good, and you decide to do a master's degree and they require the GRE, sometimes they'll waive that too. And so, if you're worried about your GPA, you could do any of those to help strengthen it. But again, if you're not under that 3.0, you still may have a shot at some schools. So I would, first do your research and look at those schools that you're looking at, like that you're interested in applying to, and looking at their GPA requirements and going from there. And any of y'all feel free to add, but yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
I'd like to add that. Oh, well, you can go first if you want. Okay. So when I actually started doing this whole PA thing, my undergrad GPA was at a 2.84. So I definitely needed to do some work to bring it up to above 3. I took a lot of classes at a community college. I went that route because it was the most cost-effective thing. I didn't think it made sense to me to like go into an MPH program, for example, and pay like $60,000, $80,000 just to get a master's degree, just to apply to PA school. I think it makes much more sense if you just take the post like classes that you did poorly in or like didn't get an A in and retake those and start from there. What's special about EVMS, for example, and why I applied there is that they do a GPA recalculation. So they only take the highest grade from like your retake. So like say if you got like a C in anatomy, a B in anatomy, and then your third time you got an A, like they'll take the A. So that's why I applied there, and I think that really helped me because having a minimum GPA of right around the 3.08 is when I actually finished after taking all those classes. It doesn't get you into a lot of schools. I got 14 rejections out of that, but it only takes one to get into. And what's cool about that is that whole process was I did a lot of post-bac classes, so many that I actually got 2 associate degrees, and I didn't even plan on doing it. I just took so many nutrition classes to boost my science GPA up.
What I was just gonna echo is that when we talk about GPA, we're really not like talking about all of the GPAs that are considered. And so when you're looking at programs and you're looking at their requirements, you need to make sure that the program may or may not have like more than one GPA requirement. For example, when I applied to Shenandoah, there was a GPA requirement of 3.0 across the board. So my cumulative had to be a 3.0. My undergrad GPA, I believe, no, not my undergrad, because I wouldn't have gotten in. My science GPA had to be a 3.0, and I think there was one more, and I don't recall exactly which one it was, but similarly to Fritz, like I think I graduated with like a 297 from undergrad. I had taken most of my prereqs because I was on the pre-PA track. I went to James Madison for undergrad. I was on the pre-PA track, and so I did like the courses there. But I also had some outstanding requirements to apply to all of the programs that I wanted to apply to. And there were some courses that I maybe got B's or C's in. And so I did the same thing as Fritz. Like I just retook them at a community college one at a time to make sure I could get an A. So part of, and like the question is like, if going back into like a full-time program or something of that sort would actually make you do worse, that's not actually going to help you get into PA school, because realistically, if the goal is to get your grade up, you want to set yourself up to be able to get A's in these classes, especially if you're retaking a class because you want to show upward growth. And also if even if you're just taking it for the first time, because GPAs like drop really quickly, but are harder to get up because the more credits you have, it's almost like the harder it is to make like it move up a little bit, if that makes sense. So definitely just like requirements. Read them 10 times, make a spreadsheet, write them down. And there are CASPA GPA calculators that you can look at before you go through the whole process of submitting an application and finding out. But you won't know like what CASPA calculates your GPAs to be until you've submitted one application. So you can also keep that in mind. But GPA is not the only thing. So do you want to add that as well? Like if you're worried about GPA, that's great. Make sure you meet that requirement, but that's not the only thing that programs are looking at.
Perfect. Yes. And I definitely want to echo that too. Like they're looking for a well-rounded person, right? Because like patients don't want to have a provider that's a robot. Like they want to have a provider that, has a personality and that like has good patient, interaction, that has people skills. And so they're looking at all of that when you apply. That's why your personal statement is important. Your hours and like what you do is important. And so all of that factors into them making their decision. So yes, 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 yes. Another question that we had in the
I
chat.
wanted to quickly jump
Oh,
in real quick. Sorry.
yes.
No, it's just that you have someone and one of the participants has their hand raised for a really long time. So I was gonna allow her to talk. It's Hannah or Hannah. There we go. You should be able to talk now.
Yes, hi, thank you. Can you all hear me?
Yes, sorry about that.
No worries. Thank you guys so much for the information thus far. My question, I have two outstanding courses that kind of go across the board for all the programs I'm interested in. It's anatomy and physiology 1 and 2. I'm enrolled in the first one and it ends May 12th. Do you think I should apply as soon as the CASPA application opens, or should I wait till I complete that first course so I only have one outstanding course, if that makes sense?
Yes, I'll answer that.
Okay.
I was in the same boat as you, with a lab actually. I needed 1 credit hour to to matriculate into like my program because I didn't have an anatomy and physiology lab. And so I called my programs, like I just called my program, and I actually spoke with the program director at the time. And she had encouraged me to just go ahead and apply, because as long as you complete your courses, at least I'm pretty sure it's with all of the programs, but again, y'all please correct me if I'm wrong. But as long as you complete all of your courses prior to matriculation, you're fine. As long as you have them done prior to matriculation, you're fine. They do want to have a final transcript of all of your courses. And so, say for example, I'll just use University of Lynchburg for an example. Like we start at the end of May, right? That course ends in like middle of May. As long as you're able to submit an official transcript to them before then, like it's usually, and as long as they are aware and that they know. Again, there may be other programs that have stricter requirements and may not allow that, but I think as long as they know like, hey, like you're taking it and you're in that course and you're enrolled and you're going to complete it before you matriculate, it should be fine. But again, I would double check with the programs that you're applying to, just to make sure that that's okay.
Okay, thank you so much.
Awesome. Does anyone else have their hands raised? Again, we are sorry for missing that. I didn't even see it. Awesome.
Anyone else's hand raised, but there was,
Yeah.
do you
there
want
you
to echo some of the questions that we just maybe like typed the answers to as well? I don't
Yeah.
know if they were like super.
Yeah, we can definitely do that. And then there are two new ones in the chat, so we can definitely echo. So let's see. I'll start off just from the top with Hannah. It says, if I upload some info on CASPA now to prepare, will it refresh or delete on the April 24th opening date? And so we got a few answers to that, but just to kind of reemphasize. So yes, information will transfer. The only things that don't transfer are your transcripts. And then your references or recommendation letters don't transfer. So that's something to keep in mind. So for example, if you took a class and you're like retaking a class or you're reapplying to PA school, and you have like an updated grade, like you're gonna have to re-enter your transcripts because it's like a new cycle. And again, like references and recommendations, they want to have fresh recommendation letters. And so that's why they, require that you resubmit those for each application cycle. The next question was, which I already addressed, but will there be a link to the recording after the Zoom ins? Yes, there will be, and a PDF copy of the slides sent to y'all. Next question is, can I ask a professor for a letter of rec now? Even if I'm not applying until spring of 2026, will it carry over? And so as we mentioned before, letters won't transfer over. But what you could do is if you wanted them to write, you a letter, Flavia had said, stay in contact with that professor, they can always have it written and like save to their computer. And then like when it's time for you to apply, you can just send them an email, hey, look, I'm ready. And then they can just like submit it and already have that done. So yes, you can ask them early and then, just have them save it. And that's something that they can do because then in that way, you're still waiving your right to viewing that letter. So they're not sending it to you. But also they're still having that stored to be able to submit it whenever that time comes.
Can I add something, John,
Yes.
to that?
Yes.
I applied. I don't know what the situation is of whoever's on the call, but I graduated in 2016 from undergrad and I didn't apply to PA school until 2021. And so by that point in time, I was like, do my undergrad professors even remember me? Do I even remember them? So I didn't really think about like intentionally staying in contact with someone. Now, luckily I was taking classes at a community college, so I was able to get people, but just depending on your situation, just be mindful if you're like recent grad, about to graduate, like make those connections now with someone if you haven't already, and try to think about, it's not like the class that you did the best in, it may be the class that you tried the hardest in, the one that you showed up to office hours and like asked, begged for help all the time. Like that might be the person you want to refer you, because essentially you want to pick someone who can like speak to the positive things about you, your growth, why you would be a good PA, right? So just depending on your individual circumstance, like, and if it's been a few years and you're trying to go back, like start going back through those classes and think about who might be able to actually remember you and write something, because I do think those letters carry a lot of weight.
Absolutely. Thank you for that. All right, so I'll skim through the rest so we can answer the open ones. So yes, so there is a way to become involved with VAMPA. I'll discuss it at the end of the presentation as well, but Christi sent over the link in the chat, but I'll share a little bit more about that towards the end to where you guys can join and become members. It is free for pre-PA members to sign up. And so I'll discuss that a little bit later, but yes, there is a way that you guys can get involved now as pre-PA students. And even as a PA student, it's free membership. So awesome. And then we already addressed the EMT hours better than farm tech hours. Transcripts, yes. So how exactly do you obtain your transcripts so you can accurately put your courses into CASPA when ready to apply? And so I'm kind of both tag teamed on answering it. So you can go to your university directly for your transcripts. Sometimes if you're wanting, to use an unofficial transcript, you can use one where you can just log directly into your student account, access your grades, and see all of your grades for each semester that way. But if you're wanting more official documentation, you can always order a transcript from the transcript service that your school offers and have your own PDF copy to make sure that everything is correct. But also keep in mind that you are going to have to request official transcripts to be sent over to CASPA so they can distribute to your schools. So that's just money added. And so if you can get access, to unofficial transcripts that your school offers, you can try putting in your transcripts that way. But again, they do have a transcript fee service, which takes a load off of you, but it is money. And so I'd say start with using the unofficial transcripts from your school because they're going to have the same exact grade as your officials. And then if you're really worried, just, paying $5 to $8 to get that official and having that actual copy that you can just reuse for each school. So there's that. We already answered that one. Yes, Ava, perfect. So yeah, if you're interested in Shenandoah University, you have Danika on the call who's happy to answer any questions for you. So definitely reach out to her. I believe she put her email and Instagram in the Q&A. And so I don't know can everybody see the Q&A? I don't know if everybody can.
If they're like on their phone or something, they may not be able to, not that
Okay.
your phone. Sometimes it doesn't work in certain things. That's why I was like,
Gotcha.
can we say them out loud?
Yeah.
Just in case.
Yes.
But my email and my Instagram's up there. If someone needs me to say it verbally, I can
Yes.
at the end.
Perfect. Awesome. And then we already talked about the GPA. Okay, so some open questions that we'll head into real quick. We have about 5 minutes left before we head into the next section. Next question is, would you recommend doubling up on course requirements when inputting them into CASPA? So for example, Psych 101 requirement uploaded in addition to Psych 324, like in the same upload field. So does anyone want to take that?
I can talk on this because I actually did this with my psychology and my abnormal psychology class. So it kind of depends on the application that you're doing. Some places will require like a Gen Psych one kind of to do, like a psychology course, just like an overview one. But then some might require a little bit different. So I think it depends kind of on the program and which one you got a better grade in, which one's going to make you look better as an applicant. If there is only one and they don't require an additional one, like I use my example. So the program, University of Lynchburg, when I was applying to it, I had to have a psych one, and then I also had to have some kind of higher level psychology or other like health course that was kind of relative to it. And I used my abnormal psychology one in that place. Granted, I had a very good grade in both of those, so I could put both of those into where I would do it. But I think it's very program dependent on if they require it as an extra one, or really if you have a better grade in one, I would use the one that has a better grade. It's going to make you look better as an applicant.
Awesome. Thank you, Cole, for answering that. Next question is, when applying, do you only include the AP courses you took in high school, or do you include every course you took?
So I know when I was applying, I had quite a bit of AP courses, but you don't put any other courses that you took in high school except for AP courses that are on your college transcript. So if you pull up like your college transcript and it shows that you transferred like all these credits from AP courses, you put them in for your very first semester of college. And so that's what I ended up doing. And yeah, none of the other high school courses go in there.
Perfect. Thank you. Thank you. And then last question that we have, and then it says, additionally, does shadowing a doctor count as shadowing hours, or is it only permitted for a physician assistant or PA? And anybody can answer this as well.
I don't know that it's ever said you can't use a doctor. I don't think that would be highly unusual, but my baseline answer to everything is check the requirements of the program. But I 90% of the time you can use a doctor as well. There might be some that also require you to have shadowed APA, but they won't not count the doctor hours, if that makes sense. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's correct.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, I know like for my application, I had shadowed like a doctor for 8 hours and I put that in my application, included it. But yeah, I agree. Some schools do specifically say on their website, like you need a minimum of 8 hours of shadowing a physician assistant, for example. And in that case, you do need to meet that requirement. But if you shadowed a doctor, I would put it on your application for sure.
Awesome. Thanks, y'all. Any other questions before we transition into interview prep? And feel free to chat or raise your hand and we'll look.
I think Hannah has her hand raised.
Okay. Yes, Hannah?
Hi, it's me again. Thank you.
Hi.
This isn't
Yes.
necessarily related to the CASPA, but do any of you have any experience with virtual shadowing? Or did
Yes.
you?
Yes.
Okay.
Lot of virtual shadowing. I was finishing up my freshman year of undergrad when COVID hit, and I followed a PA on Instagram. I'm blanking on the name right now, but she had a website. It was called e-shadowing. And I believe it was once a week. She would go on, I think it was like a Wednesday night, and she would do like 1 to 2 hours of having different providers come in on like a podcast type of thing. And they would kind of explain stuff, talk about like whatever shift they were going on, and then you would get a email confirmation of your hours. Kind of at the end of each one, they'd email it to you, and I was able to keep up with that. I also There's another one that I can't remember off the top of my head, but when me and my wife were both getting ready for the PA application, we did that a lot together to get our extra hours because we went to undergrad in a very small town that did not have a lot of providers, and so that was one we were able to kind of beef up our applications as we were both getting ready to go into it.
Thank you so much, Cole. I'll definitely reach out to you after this is over for more information. I appreciate it.
Yeah, of course. I can put my stuff in at the end, and you can reach out with any questions.
Thank you.
Awesome. Well, thank you all for the amazing questions. Y'all asked some really good questions. Even some things that, I didn't even think of when I was applying. And so it's just really cool to see how much just the CASPA application has expanded, just as well as just the applicants. And so we're really excited for you all to apply for this upcoming cycle. And with that comes interview prep. And so I'm going to have Danika take over with this section. But these are just some very valuable tools for y'all. And so I'm really glad that that she could join us this evening and give you all just some words of wisdom as you all prepare for this post CASPA application. All right, so let me go.
All right. Like has been said, I'm Danika. I graduated in December from Shenandoah University, currently taking my sweet time to prepare for the pants. Talk to me about testing anxiety later. But outside of that, we're going to talk about PA school interview prep. So we all hope you get to the place where you're invited to interview, but we want to make sure that you're actually prepared for what that's going to entail. And so first things first, why is it important to actually prepare for an interview? Seems like an obvious question, but really we want to make sure that you're able to articulate your thoughts clearly, right? You don't want to walk into an interview, which is your basically the last thing between you and getting into the PA program, feeling additionally anxious or nervous when we can prepare for those things. And part of doing that is figuring out where do you need to improve and how do we make sure you're coming across as the capable and one day, hopefully, provider that you will be, right? So things that I'm going to talk about is a mock interview, the program research as it relates to preparing for the interview, and then a kind of final review of things I would do right before. Can advance. Okay, so if you've heard of a mock interview before, mock anything, it's when you simulate something, right? So a mock interview is when you're practicing the responses to questions that you would get in a PA school program interview so that you can build your confidence. And so you do preparations for a mock interview after you've submitted an application. And I personally wouldn't wait until you get an interview because the phrase is, if you stay ready, you don't have to get ready. And so once you've submitted those applications, you've obviously, followed everything we've talked about in this workshop. You've double checked all your requirements. You're on the list, you're submitting early, you're getting an interview. So you're getting an interview, and so you're going to prepare. If you want to wait, the latest I would do it is 1 or 2 weeks before the actual interview. But like I said, earlier is always better in like all things PA school. So how you can do it, there's a couple different ways, of course, from no cost to there being a cost. You can utilize peers, mentors, or any free or low cost resources that you may have locally at the university that you attend or used to attend. You can also Google common PA school interview questions. There's thousands of websites, there's thousands of forums. Earlier I saw a graphic from Be a Physician Assistant, I think, .org. If I remember correctly, I love that lady's website. I was all up and through that website. She has lots of amazing free resources. I am a, if it's free, it's me type of person. So check those things out. But also, I did pay for a mock interview service because I wanted to like do it with some structure that I didn't like wouldn't have had if I did it with a peer mentor. And I applied a little bit later, like in my post-school journey. So there wasn't really anyone to do it with. And so typically in a mock interview, they ask you, the person that's doing the interview will ask you these common questions. You'll answer and they're going to give you feedback on your responses, how you responded, your presence when you responded, and give you things that you can think about in terms of improving your communication skills and any potential weaknesses in the responses that you gave. You can advance. So some common interview question styles, motivational questions, behavioral questions, ethical or scenario questions, and then self-awareness or profession questions. I kind of grouped those together because there's only 4 numbers on the slide. But motivational questions would be like the most common. Why do you want to be a physician assistant, right? What is your motivation in becoming a PA? It could also apply to the program. It could also apply to the things that you've done in order to prepare yourself. Behavioral questions are questions that are like, how do you act in a certain situation? So a common question is describe a time you worked a part of a team, but they might take that to the next level. Describe a time that you were part of a team and there was a conflict. And so challenges, stress, like basically you being able to show that program, how do you respond in a high stress or difficult situation? Because we know in medicine, like we come across those all the time. The other questions, ethical and scenario questions, those would be questions about kind of similar to the things that you probably get asked on a CASPA test, as in what would you do in this situation where there could be some gray? How would you handle a patient who refuses treatment, a colleague that made a medical error, so on and so forth. And so they might present a scenario and ask you your thoughts on that. And so when you're preparing, I don't recall that I actually got an ethics question in my interviews, but when you're preparing, you can actually look into some of these things. The ethical questions, you can prepare for. There is like an answer that they're looking for. And so I would definitely, if you've never been asked those types of questions before, just peruse and take a look at it. Maybe it'll help you prepare for CASPA. I didn't have to take CASPA when I was applying, so I have no context on that, but could be similar. And then last, the self-awareness and PA profession questions. Those are things that are like, what about yourself as a person and your awareness of yourself, but then also your awareness of the PA profession. So what are your greatest strengths and weaknesses? Like what's going to be the greatest challenge for the PA profession in the next 10 years? How would you describe the role between a PA and a physician? Things like that. So these are some of the questions that you could actually use, like any of these questions on this slide, to practice in a mock interview scenario. And so when you think about answering the questions, you want to have a strategy. If you remember or were taught at any point in time in either writing or in maybe debate or something like that, if you want to make sure you're answering a question really well, you should probably restate it. So I'll get into the STAR method in a second, but because that applies to one specific type of question. But in general, I always think, okay, if they ask me, what's the greatest risk to the PA profession in the next 10 years, or challenge is a better way to say it. I might start with my response with the greatest challenge to the PA profession in the next 10 years is, and then go from there. And that just kind of helps me make sure I'm answering the question, and I'm staying on task and on track with what they're looking for. Other things that you can use is like the STAR method. And so that's looking at the situation, at the task, at the action and then the result. So if you think about a behavioral question, and one of the examples of a behavior question was like, describe a time that you had difficulty being part of a team, for example. So first, the S situation, explain the situation so they understand the context, but you don't need to spend all your time there. Take a minute or two. Next, probably no more than a minute, really. Next, talk about the task. So what was the issue? What was the difficulty, the challenge? Then the main part of the STAR method is, what did you do? Because again, the point of these questions is for you to show them how you handle things in specific situations. And so spending a lot of your time on that action piece, and then finally giving them like the end of the story. So what was the result of the action that you took? So the STAR method is helpful. You could potentially apply it to the other categories. I think it just fits really well into the behavioral questions. And if you forget all about STAR, start by restating the question and go from there. Okay, so when it comes to program research, you're probably like, I already did research on the program. This is not the type of research like when you're looking into the requirements and things like that. Although these things are important to look at ahead of time, if you want to revisit it before you interview with the program, because you probably looked at multiple programs. And if you haven't, now is a great time to really dive into these things. I would recommend always looking at it on the front end, but right before your interview, you want to research the program again. Take a look at their mission, their vision, their values. As Christi mentioned earlier, Shenandoah requires you to write a supplemental about the values and that the university has. And so it was almost expected for me that there was going to be a question related to that in the interview, because they went out of their way to make it a supplemental. And so that may be a good little tip or trick. Things that particular program values are being shown in more places than one. This information is important because it can help you prepare questions to ask about the program, because you might read something in the mission, vision, or values that makes you think of something that you want to ask. So, for example, one of the questions that I had prepared that I felt like applied to me as a person, was important to my personal values, but was also a good question to ask programs was, does your program prioritize DEI, right? And if they said yes, my follow-up was going to be, what are some practical ways that you implement that? And if they said no, I would ask, well, how would you support a student such as myself? And for obvious reasons, being like, I'm not part of the majority. So diversity, equity, and inclusion is important to me. I want to know how I fit into this like larger space. And so both researching can help you prepare for the questions they may have for you, but also prepare yourself to ask them questions, because the interview is basically a two-way street. It's a conversation to get to know each other and see if it's a mutually good fit for you as well as the program. And really more specifically that year, that cohort, because schools are looking to get a good balance of people within the cohort. You can advance. Okay, final review. So 2 to 3 days right before your interview, what you want to do is take some time, double check where you're going, what time you need to get there, double check how long it's going to get there, and put in the time that you're supposed to be there, not the time that you're actually looking right now, because traffic and other things, especially in Virginia, make a huge difference. So put in your expected arrival time and make your arrival time 30 minutes before you actually have to be there. So if they tell you to be there 30 minutes ahead of time, get there an hour ahead, just so you can give yourself the time to woosah and, prepare for what's going to happen. Some of that anxiety is going to be taken away if you actually look at the route and the map way ahead of time. Review the notes and the questions that just came from the last slide, right? What do you know about the program? What questions do you have for them? There's going to be an opportunity for that. Review the interview etiquette things that we'll talk about in just a moment, and practice anything that makes you feel nervous. Try on your outfit, especially women. If you think that you're going to wear something new and special, put that on. Just make sure it's appropriate, make sure it's comfortable, and dress for success. You are, again, representing you. This is your one in-person opportunity, hopefully, or Zoom or whatever, to show them who you are. And so you want to make sure you show up appropriate. And if you don't know what appropriate is, Google it. If you have a question about your outfit, double check, because that would be just not a good first impression. So what you wear matters in a professional setting. Next slide. Okay, interview etiquette. So, like I said, you're interviewing the program as much as they're interviewing you. So when you're doing when you're in the middle of your interview, make eye contact. Look at them. At the beginning, if they shake your hand, make sure it's a firm handshake. Give them a smile. Sit up when you're talking. You can nod to show that you're engaged. You don't need to, continuously nod, but just do small things that show that you are engaged in the conversation and invested because they are in you. And a part of that is actually listening to what they're saying so that when it's your turn to speak, you're responding in a thoughtful manner and not just to fill the time. And on that note, you do not have to speak immediately. It is absolutely okay for you to take a minute after you're asked the question to think, formulate a response, and then say it. They understand that you are a person and that this is a high stress situation, and it would be in your best interest to make sure that when you start speaking, you're ready. And you can go to the next. Along the same lines, enthusiasm and passion go a long way. PAs are very excited about being PAs. PAs are very excited about the PA profession. I've never come across a PA that hasn't behaved in that way or had good things to say about it. And so if you want to join this profession, you want to make sure that you're expressing the enthusiasm and passion as well as knowledge about the profession in and of itself. And so if you have any relevant experiences with the PA about how you chose PA, got to this path, share those things because, again, they show that you care. And be concise. I can ramble. This is the hardest one for me. So talking slower, enunciating the words, not using slang. This is not a conversation with your friends or, a family member even. This is a professional interview. And so you want to make sure you're using words that are appropriate in that setting. Next slide. Is there another slide? Oh, great. Awesome. Made it in the nick of time.
Yeah. Appreciate it. Yeah, so thank you again for coming. We wanted to open up just this time for just any final questions. I know that we're at the end of